Welcome to Why We're Fans. I'm Duran, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Gennaro.
In all of our episodes, we cover the past, present, and the future of all your favorite NFL football teams.
We love hearing your stories, talking the NFL draft, and reminiscing about the good old days.
If you like the same, be sure to subscribe to this channel and like this episode. And leave a comment below if you want to answer any of our questions.
Follow us on Twitter to stay up to date on our latest interviews. And like we always say, win or lose, we're all fans. Enjoy this episode.
And welcome back to another episode of Why We're Fans. It's your hosts, as always, Gennaro and Duran. How are you doing today, Duran?
Good. We're here on a Sunday, and there's not too many of these we got left before there's actual football being played on Sundays. So we're killing some time waiting for that. But yeah, I'm ready to roll.
Oh yeah, me too. I'm loving it. Today we got on our guest. I'll let him go and tell us about all the work he's on right now. But we got Jacob Westendorf. Pretty sure I said that right, correct?
Yeah, you got it, man. That's I was gonna say you didn't even ask me beforehand, so I was like, I'm kind of waiting for him to butcher this, but no, I guess it's a little easier to pronounce than I anticipated. But yeah, I'm the owner, I'm the CEO, whatever title you want to throw out. I haven't really given myself one of Game On Wisconsin. You can follow us on Twitter at Game On WI, and that was a concoction from me and a few other people that are just big Packers fans and wanted to have an opportunity to create something we could all be proud of. So instead of going a couple different routes, and there are some other really good Packers sites out there, as you guys may be aware of, we wanted to kind of do our own thing. So we've been able to do that. Our 1 year anniversary is in 1 month and 14 days from today. So July 20th is our 1 year anniversary. So I'm excited for that. Excited to talk about, I didn't realize when I agreed to come on this, these were two of the teams I hated the most when I was growing up with the Niners and the Cowboys. It felt like we played each other in the playoffs every year from the mid 90s until like the early 2000s.
Even recent with Dallas.
Yeah. That's and I'm looking forward to a potential playoff game with them with our old coach, obviously hanging out in Texas. So the Cowboys, they're not as, I don't know what it is. They're not as hateable now without Aikman and Emmitt Smith and Irvin, and maybe it's because the Cowboys haven't had as much success against the Packers as they have in the 90s. But no, I like what you guys are doing with that team. I love Dak Prescott. I'm probably higher on him than most non-Cowboys fans are. And I'm personally, you guys don't have to get too, I'm a fan of Mike McCarthy, the person, the coach side of things. We'll see if that, if the game has passed him by. I think there was a time where he was a really good coach, and it's hard to tell after 1 year in Dallas where no offseason, brand new team he's with, and then his starting quarterback. And I think all five starting offensive linemen missed a game at some point last year. So
that's true.
We'll see if that ends up the case or not with him. But I like what you guys are doing. And then obviously the 49ers and the Packers are connected because of Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur being so closely together. And that's been a fun thing to see.
Oh yeah, for sure. Before I got a couple questions. One, where can everybody find you, like social media and whatnot? And two, did the Game On come from Wayne's World at all?
No, you are the first person to ask that question though. So kudos on that. You could find Game On Twitter is at Game On WI. Me personally, I'm just my name at Jacob Westendorf for my stuff. So it's a lot of Packers talk and a couple pictures of my daughter who turns 2 here in September. So she's still a baby and she's still really cute and doesn't talk back yet. So, she's pretty much perfect in that aspect.
There you go. Awesome. All right. Duran, you ready to get started?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. So we brought you on to ask you some questions. So first things first, how did you become a part of the Cheeseheads?
Sure. So I was born in September of 1991. I am from Illinois. I'm about an hour and a half outside of Chicago. So everybody around me says they're from Chicago. I am not one of those people. I'm from Rockford, Illinois, and I've been here my entire life. And when I was a kid, it was my dad was an Eagles fan. So he kind of had me grow up watching them a little bit, but they weren't on TV as much. And the Packers were, and I'm probably just like every other fan my age. So I turned 30 this September, and my first vivid memory is the iconic image of Brett Favre's career, him running around the Superdome with his helmet above his head, and the Packers winning Super Bowl 31. And that season kind of became I was 5 when they won that Super Bowl. So that kind of was when the love affair started. I remember I didn't watch cartoons on Saturday mornings. I watched Sports Center, and I was able to tell you the Packers stat lines from the previous week. And I had all these books, and there's still some stuff hanging out down here around in my basement, a little bit of stuff I read and watched and everything from when I was a kid. So that 95 and then 96, 97 Packers team was very influential as to who I became a fan of when I was a kid. And honestly, it probably helped that the Bears were terrible and they had been bad for quite some time. And growing up, the Packers, since I was born, the Packers and Bears have played, I think they said 58 times, and Green Bay's won 43 of those 58 games or something.
Wow.
It's not pretty for our friends to the South if you're in Wisconsin. So yeah, that's how it started. Brett Favre was my hero. I thought he walked on water. And then obviously I'm also very fortunate. I've only ever seen 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks under center for the Packers. So I don't know what bad quarterback play is.
Yeah. I see. The first question I want to ask is, just looking behind you, I see all the memorabilia you got. You got some jerseys, some photos. Where do you get most of your memorabilia from? And what's the holy grail item? What's your favorite one?
The holy grail item is right behind me over here. That is the autographed jersey of Bart Starr. And behind me here, you guys probably can't see the whole thing, but this is the quarterback wall. So it's Favre, Starr, Rodgers. I didn't put them in a particular order, I guess. Eventually, I think it started in numerical order, but then I got kind of mad at Aaron Rodgers, I guess. So I moved him out of my camera. So I moved him down. But Waukesha Sports Cards is in Waukesha, Wisconsin. They do a lot of like private signings and public signings. That's how I got to meet Brett Favre. And I got my jersey signed by him. So that's hanging out right over here. I got a picture with him, all that good stuff. They do a lot of good stuff, and they do some stuff. It's not just Packers. So for you guys, if you want to check them out, they have some Cowboys guys that have come through, some Niners stuff. And they do private signings. So you don't even have to go there. You can just mail it to them and they'll get it signed and send it back to you. I was actually just there yesterday. I got my Donald Driver jersey signed yesterday.
Wow.
The holy grail item. Like I mentioned, if you want me to go other than the jersey, I guess the photo behind me, the history buff that I am, the idea that one franchise has been as fortunate, the 49ers are kind of in this way a little bit as well, but even the Cowboys, even to some extent, but the idea that, you can argue 3 of the 15-ish best quarterbacks have played for one franchise. Bart Starr, the night that all 3 of them were in the house together before Bart passed away on that Thanksgiving, they lost to the Bears last night and nobody remembers that. It's because it was all 3 of those dudes were in the house together. It's like a fraternity between Packers quarterbacks, how they kind of act and interact with each other. And it was really cool to see. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, Waukesha Sports Cards, and then anything related to these quarterbacks, I guess, is probably it.
Perfect.
Waukesha Sports Cards. Shout out to them. That's awesome.
Growing up in Illinois, did you have any other Packers fans for friends? Were you in any fan clubs or anything like that you can kind of sit down and watch the game with or shoot the shit with?
Yeah, no clubs. But my best friend, since we were 5 years old, his name ironically is Jacob as well. But we got to be friends because our names were Jacob and we were Packers fans. And
Nice.
We had before we got older and got married and all that good stuff, we were every Sunday we would watch the game together. The last game I think that we watched, wow, that's not true. But the last game I can remember watching at his parents' house was the NFC Championship game against the Giants, which was Favre's last game in Green Bay. We didn't know that at the time, but that was not a fun day. All 3 of us just kind of sit there and sulk after that game ends. But it was a lot of fun growing up with those guys. Growing in this area, there's more than you'd think, but it's not a lot. I am known in my circles from high school, and I went to a small school where we had 350 total enrollment, I think was our number from freshmen to seniors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was Packers guy. So when they won, I knew that everybody was going to leave me alone. And when they lost, it wasn't going to be a very fun Monday. So I took it took it like a man, I guess, so to speak. But yeah, it was a lot of fun growing up in enemy territory, so to speak. And I say that again, like I mentioned, because the Bears just haven't been very good. So getting to experience by far and away, and maybe this was going to be a follow-up, but one of the best experiences I had was it was my freshman year of college when the Packers won Super Bowl 45 in Dallas at their new stadium. 2 weeks prior to that Super Bowl, they played the Bears in the NFC Championship game at Soldier Field. And I didn't say anything that Monday morning, just kind of let my smile say everything. But the ultimate bragging rights game belongs to the Green Bay Packers, and everybody around here will forever know that.
Yep. Just going back and watching the highlights of Jordy and Aaron Rodgers, and a lot of their highlights are versus the Bears. So I think you had some good days there. I was just noticing that. I was like, wow, another big game against the Bears, another one versus the Bears. So yeah, you were smiling a lot.
They always show out against, within their division, whether it's let's see here, like whether it's the Lions, Vikings, or the Bears, but
sure feels that way
against the Bears for sure.
6 touchdown passes in the first half. Aaron Rodgers once threw against the Bears. I remember that on a Sunday nighter.
Yep, and he would have had more, but he got benched like in the third quarter.
Yeah, it was 42 to. If Chicago had kept up at all, he would have broken the touchdown record. Yeah, it was 42 to nothing at halftime.
Yep, exactly. Go ahead, G.
So when it comes to the game day, do you have a sort of ritual or superstition that you have when you're watching it? And how do you watch the game? Whether you live stream, you have to be alone with your crowd, with your boy Jacob. How does the game day situation look like for you?
Now that I'm older, it used to be I had to watch the game with just my brother. My brother would come over and watch the games with us. But with a 2-year-old, I kind of have to chase her around a little bit sometimes too. But for the most part, it is that, 3-hour stretch. I'm not streaming. And this is just me personally, I don't think anybody's all that interested in watching me watch a game because I'm relatively quiet. I try and take it all in as to what happened, why it happened. When something good happens, I get excited. When something bad happens, I just kind of sit there. So the championship game against the 49ers 2 years ago, for example, was a pretty quiet day. There wasn't much for me to say that day. But the superstition is whatever jersey color the team is wearing. So if it's green or white, I have to match them. And the superstition's been broken a little bit as I've gotten a little bit older, but it used to be offense was green and defense was white. So one of the big question marks in my head from that 2010 Super Bowl run, if you guys don't remember, was they were on the road for the first 3 playoff games. Mm-hmm. And then in the Super Bowl, it comes out, they're wearing their green home jerseys. I was like, okay, so do I match what the team is wearing or do I wear the same jersey I've worn during this winning streak? And I ended up wearing, it was my Clay Matthews white jersey for the Super Bowl. And had they lost, there's probably some weird part of me that would have blamed myself for them losing that game, but they didn't. So I'm thankful that it didn't come down to that. But yeah, I remember that being a whole week, like just wrestling with something that I know has no effect on the game, but for some crazy reason, I feel like it does.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, everyone gets like that. I know during our Super Bowl run, I wore the same outfit every single day. I was like, okay, whatever. He has to wear the same everything, shoes, socks, whatever. Same thing all the time.
What was your first jersey, Packers jersey?
Brett Favre, I think, was the one that I can remember. Other than him, it was actually Dorsey Levens. He was the running back in the mid 90s, kind of the iconic touchdown of the 96 NFC championship game against the Panthers. He was really good. I remember, Antonio Freeman. I think I owned one of those at one point. The first one I ever bought for myself was the day Brett Favre got traded to the Jets. I bought myself an Aaron Rodgers jersey that day. And that was like my statement to the world of no, I'm not following the player. I really have this like anti-player fan thing. That's kind of why I like basketball, but it tends to annoy me the most because there are so many just player fans in the NBA, and I don't understand that. Just a me thing, because what happens when that player retires or leave, just whatever. So that was my statement of nope, I'm with the team. I root for the jersey and not the name on the back of it. So the first one I ever bought myself was, I bought an Aaron Rodgers jersey when I was 16.
Nice. Yeah. I think the player fan stuff, a lot of it has to do with fantasy sports too.
And I hate fantasy football. Like I play it every year. I play it every year, but I hate it. And I think fantasy football has done such a disservice to the way we watch football, because
yeah.
the only thing you guys watch, not you guys, but they watch and think about is like, okay, quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, that's all fine and dandy that they have those things, but what happens if they, like Kansas City in the Super Bowl, they couldn't block the Bucks.
Yep.
They didn't lose because they didn't have enough weapons, or Tom Brady played that much better than Mahomes. Brady just was able to stand in the pocket, and Mahomes was running for his life. I mean, I just think football is so much more than the fantasy box score stats and everything like that. So I love it because I play it, but I hate it. I do.
War is won in the trenches. For
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always used to play the offensive line. So I'm definitely a big win it up there, man, all the time.
Yeah. Actually in our fantasy football league, we throw in some defensive players too.
Good.
So
Good. That's the way it should be.
You can't just watch one side of the ball. You got to watch both sides.
Yeah, that's for sure. So when you play fantasy football, are you Packers biased?
Oh, no. No. If they have guys like my first round pick this year, or my second round pick was Aaron Jones, but I'm not going to pick their third receiver just to say the only time I have Packer bias is with my last pick. So my last pick, my Mr. Irrelevant, I always pick some random Packer. This year it happened to be Jamal Williams. So other years it's been like Ty Montgomery or Jeff Janis. You're going to cut that guy anyways.
Yeah.
So instead of taking, somebody, I do that as a nostalgic kind of pick kind of thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good one for sure. Jeff Janis. Wow. I forgot about that guy.
Yeah.
I didn't have him in the playoff game where he caught those two bomb Hail Marys.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Classic. Yeah. Have you had a chance to go to Lambeau Field?
Yeah, my first Lambeau experience was when I was 12. We went, they played the Eagles on Monday Night Football. I just mentioned it. My dad and my uncle, big Eagles fans.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the Donovan McNabb, James Thrash, Todd Pinkston. I don't think Brian Westbrook was their running back yet, but Freddie Mac. Yeah. So that was the year that Green Bay actually played Philly twice. And the second time was 4th and 26. So that year they lost 17-14 on Monday Night Football against the Eagles. And then that was my first experience. And then the first time they won was 4 years later against the Eagles again. It was Mason Crosby made like a 48-yard field goal as time expired. But something I've been fortunate with is I've kind of been linked up with a couple of companies related to the National Football League that have allowed me to work a bunch of games. So the Des Bryant game, I was in attendance for that. If they've played a home playoff game since 2010, I've been there. So I'm there very frequently. I'm very fortunate. I'm very lucky from that side of things, but it's the greatest place in the world. I love it there. You can not tell I think it was Ron Wolf said, you can't tell the story of professional football without mentioning Green Bay, Wisconsin, and that stadium specifically. So the Ice Bowl was played there. I mean, you walk across the same steps that Jerry Kramer and Bart Starr and Fuzzy Thurston and just all these dudes that played in the 60s. And it's like the same dudes walked across these bricks. And that's so rare now because the Cowboys, for example, they have a brand new stadium. The 49ers have a brand new stadium. And I'm not picking on those teams specifically, just thinking like you used to be able to walk across the same steps as Joe Montana, and you can't do that anymore. And that's, Lambeau, they've done so well. And it's so in the middle of just some random ass city in Wisconsin. And it feels like it's just kind of dropped in there. And that gives you that nostalgic feeling as to, this is different from any other professional sports venue, to be honest with you. If I'm wrong, somebody can feel free to tell me that, but it just feels different in that it's in a small town and it's just kind of dropped in there.
Yep. That's what makes it so great.
Do you remember your first away game?
Yes, it was 2010. So the year they won the Super. Oh yeah. There's a good story that comes with this too. Right. 2010. It was the year they won the Super Bowl, but before they went on. So if you guys remember that year, they won their last 2 regular season games. And then they went on that run in the playoffs. But the 2 weeks before that, they lost to New England with Matt Flynn the week prior to beating the piss out of the Giants at home. So they lose to New England with Matt Flynn, and they had a chance to win that game. And then Mike McCarthy proudly proclaims after the game that we're nobody's underdogs, which is to me is like his legacy as far as Green Bay goes. The week prior to that, they were in Detroit, and there was reports of a bad snowstorm on its way in. And I was like, my dad was like, dude, don't go. And I'm like, I'm 18. I'm smarter than you are. Like, I'm going. So we get to the game. Rodgers gets concussed just before halftime. Matt Flynn plays. They don't score a touchdown. They lose 7-3. And 18-year-old armchair general manager me tweets, fire Ted Thompson, fire Mike McCarthy. And I took a picture of that as a reminder to not get too high or too low after one football game. But obviously 7 weeks later, they're Super Bowl champions. But to add insult to injury, my dad was right, because they closed out. There's only 2 highways that you can take to get back to Illinois from Detroit. And both of them were closed down because of the snow. So we ended up stuck in Detroit that next day and had to drive home the next morning. And I missed a math final that thankfully my teacher was a sports fan. So she let me reschedule, because in college, that's a no-no. You don't get to reschedule finals. These are the days and that's it. But I was like, I'm stuck here. I can't get back. The plan was to be back. So she was cool. But yeah, I wanted everybody fired. And then they won the Super Bowl, like I said, 6 weeks later. So that was my first away game.
Yeah, that was a low scoring game, 3-7, like you said. No one even scored until the second half.
No, and they scored on, it was like some random screen pass. Green Bay had been winning 3-0 and up until that point. And then they scored, and it was just like, okay, they're going to have to score a touchdown with their backup quarterback. And then I remember it was like 4th and 1, and Flynn threw the ball to the moon, and it was just out of the reach of Greg Jennings, and they ended up losing.
Yeah.
Didn't have that Rodgers luck on that one.
No, absolutely not. There's a difference between Aaron Rodgers and Matt Flynn. Who knew?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Gee, anything else for this section?
No, nothing else.
Yeah, let's move on.
All right. So this next section, me and Duran like to take a guess before you announce.
Oh, okay.
We want to know your favorite player. So Duran, if you want to go take a shot first.
Yeah,
I will give you guys one hint.
Yeah.
When I pick favorite players, I don't pick players I never saw play. So I can't, in my opinion, I can't say my favorite player is Bart Starr because I never saw him play. So you got to start in like 1995.
Yep. Just because I think it started your fandom and, kind of got you on the path to being a Packers fan, I got to go with Brett Favre.
All right, I'm gonna go with one of the long blonde-haired linebackers, and I'm gonna go with AJ Hawk.
Oh, I do like AJ more than the average fan might, but the answer is Reggie White, the Minister of Defense. I like pass rushers.
The preacher.
The Minister of Defense. Him, Clay Matthews, Charles Woodson's not really a pass rusher, but he comes to mind as a favorite player as well. And Woodson was awesome. I've had the chance to meet him a couple times and shake his hand. And that's the only time I've ever fanboyed a player was when I was like, because most of the time I thought is like, these dudes put pants on the same way I do. So what's the difference? But Woodson was different for whatever reason. He's one of those dudes that when he talks, it's like you can hear what he's saying in his voice, even when you read it kind of thing. And you just kind of stop what you're doing and listen to him sort of thing. So, Charles Woodson is a close second, but Reggie White is number one for sure.
Yeah, we all know Reggie White, of course, Hall of Famer, 13-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champ, Defensive Player of the Year twice. I mean, what more can you say about him? But he was he was playing for the Packers for 6 years. I just does one play kind of stand out to you, or one moment?
One radio call. They're playing the Super Bowl against New England, and Reggie had 3 sacks that day, which at the time was a Super Bowl record that's since been matched and I believe broken. I think Coney Ely is one of the guys who has like 4 or something. It's some random dude.
Some random guy.
But Reggie actually has sacks on back-to-back plays. And Jim Irwin, who recently passed away, was the Packers radio announcer before Wayne Larrivee, who does the job now, and he's great. But there's a play where, like I said, it's the second one, and he says, here's Drew straight back in the pocket, and he just yells, Reggie got him again. And I remember the TV call is John Madden saying Reggie White's going to take over this game, and he absolutely did. Reggie was awesome. And then I remember I was like 8 when he ended up coming back to play for the Panthers, and I was super confused as to how that could work. But no, the Reggie highlights are awesome. The ability that he has to just throw offensive tackles with one arm, I'll never understand that, but he was incredible.
Yeah, there's plenty of highlights of that one arm throw.
Exactly. And those like left tackles, they were no joke. They were stouts.
No, like Larry Allen weighed 380 pounds or something. Like he was listed at whatever, but that's not what he weighed. Like they did that to hurt his feelings, keep his feelings.
Yeah. Moving on to the more recent pass rusher. Clay Matthews, he was a guy that I had on the list here.
Mhm.
And, he's kind of taken over for the Packers stat wise. He's number 1 in sacks, number 1 in tackles for loss, number 3 in forced fumbles. And I kind of feel like he was a staple, of course, for that Packers defense. If he was Batman, who would you say was Robin on that team? Because I think there's a lot of them to choose from. G mentioned AJ Hawk. We already mentioned Charles Woodson. A couple DB guys out there.
Yes. Tremont, who actually we just had as an interview on one of our shows on Game On, and he's an awesome guy. Broke up the last pass in Super Bowl 45, so that was nice. So are you talking for the Super Bowl team or like when Clay played in general?
When he played in general, pretty much.
Okay. Because here's the thing is like Clay was the best player on the 2010 team. I don't think he was a defensive player of the year candidate that year. And so he was the best player on that team. If that's the case, then the answer is easy. And it's Charles Woodson, because Woodson he's a Hall of Famer. He was the defensive player of the year before.
Yep.
If you want to go with like who Clay has played with after Woodson, the answer is probably Tremont Williams. You can make a case for Julius Peppers. That was really when they had Julius, that was really the only time that they had. So like in Green Bay now, we've got the Super Smith brothers and we've got Rashawn Gary. But when Clay played, it was really like him, and they just kind of threw a dude across from him. Or Nick Perry was a first-round pick, but he didn't live up to it, kind of thing. Trying to figure out how that all can work. But I think that Julius Peppers was the most impressive physical specimen I've ever stood next to. Everything on that man, his head, his ears, his arms, like he's just a very large human.
He's a big dude.
Yeah, he played great for multiple teams. I mean, that guy's definitely a Hall of Famer too. I think he's top 3 in sacks over career sacks, something like that. He's way up there.
He's great. I know that much.
Yeah. Of course, Clay Matthews, he's remembered for that fumble in the Super Bowl, forced fumble against Rashard Mendenhall. But I was looking back, he was drafted in 2009, 26th overall at a USC. And that defense that USC had that year was pretty damn good. And he was the leader of that. Ray Malaluga, Brian Cushing, Taylor Mays, Will Harris, Everson Griffin, Malcolm Smith, and Jarrell Casey. I mean, just those linebackers. Yeah, exactly.
Just churning out dudes. I think there was a really good story that Brian Gutekunst told during the draft. Everything kind of got overshadowed by the quarterback drama, but he did tell a really good story about they traded up to draft Amari Rodgers. And he was talking about how Ted Thompson traded up to draft Clay Matthews that year. So that was the year they picked BJ Raji 9th. And then after that, they started working on going to get Matthews. And they were like, okay, well, how much, Ted, how much do you want to give up? And at the time, the Packers front office, that was Goody and John Schneider, who's now the GM for the Seattle Seahawks. And I think John Dorsey was there at the time. And they were just kind of like, Ted, how much do you want to give up? And Goody said that Ted was like, I want the player. And they're like, okay, well, at what point is too much? He goes, no, you don't understand. I want the player. So they ended up giving up, I think, like 3 picks to move back into the first round, and worth it. Clay Matthews, the franchise all-time leader in sacks. So, but I thought that was a cool little story, like into the war room. Cause I think we get so worried about, like, San Francisco is a great example. If Trey Lance is awesome, do you give a shit how much they gave up to go get him?
Not at all.
No. And I think everybody's all worried about, like, oh, what happened? Was that worth the trade? Or, was this player worth that? It's like, if he's good, you don't care. Like, do you care? This might be a little bit different, but do you care that the Cowboys used the 4th overall pick on Zeke?
I do, because I wanted Jalen Ramsey.
Okay. That's a fair question. Maybe, let's think about it this way then. Let's say they drafted Zeke in the 2nd round, and you shouldn't draft running backs early. Like, do you care if he's good? I don't think most people do.
Yeah, I
don't
definitely
think you should.
Yeah, I don't hate it, but I had one player that I wanted above Zeke, but no, I still think he was a good pick, especially for what he's produced.
Yeah, and Jalen Ramsey's awesome. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that it worked out that way. But I think that, like I said, I think we get too focused on value and so many things that are just subjective. And we have no idea what's going on in these trade negotiations. Like, somebody's like, oh, man, they gave up that pick to move up 4 spots. It's like, well, maybe somebody was offering something similar. There's just so much that we don't know and we act like we do.
Yeah, in the draft room too. That's what that's like one of my dreams is to be in the war room during draft day, even if it's not the first round, like the day 2 where, it's really getting down to character guys and things like that, just because I know out of whatever 350 draft picks, teams have like 150 players on their board. So more than half of them get crossed off just because of scheme, off the field stuff, and fit for the team. So
and there's
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, and there's dudes that we get. Tony Pauline was on with us a while ago. He works for PFN, and he was telling us how like 110 to 125, so close, maybe a little more this year because of the COVID draft, essentially with no combine and all that good stuff. Basically said like there are guys that we on the internet like that teams don't even consider because this is the type of player that we like that fits in, and you have to build your team different based on even geography. Ted Thompson talked about that all the time. You can't have these 6, Jabril Cox is a guy who plays for the Cowboys now, and he was really small and really fast, and some of that stuff that matters. But it's tough to draft a guy like that when you play in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and it's going to be cold and it's going to be nasty, and teams are going to play differently based on where they're at and playing home games there and all that stuff. So there's just a lot to it that I don't think always think about when it comes to. So my general philosophy, if you will, is try and watch the whole thing play out and then see, here was the plan. Here's what their thought process was. And maybe where do I learn from that so I can kind of understand better as to what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great strategy. Being a former offensive lineman, is there a guy that you kind of feel like it was underrated for the Packers that you kind of want to shine some light on? Could be offensive lineman, could be somewhere else.
Yeah, Josh Sitton and TJ Lang come to mind.
There you
that
go.
Was to me like maybe the best until the Cowboys ended up with Zach Martin, and honestly it doesn't matter who his running mate was because Zach Martin is that good. But Sitton and Lang might have been the best guard combo for quite some time. Those guys were really good together. They had some fun personalities. They actually had I think they were they were just brought back for an alumni weekend, and they both like chugged a beer at Lambeau. That was kind of cool. I mean, that's just kind of the guys that they were.
Yeah.
Sitton's career ended a little goofy. They cut him kind of unexpectedly, and then Lang ended up signing. He went back, and he's from Michigan, so he went and played in Detroit for the last years of his career. But those guys were fun. I thought they were really good. And, like we mentioned earlier, the best Cowboys team in recent memory had the best offensive line in football. The best Niners team that went to the Super Bowl, they had the best offensive line in football. And the Packers teams that have been really good, 2014, and then this past year, 2020, the best offensive lines in football. So I think it's something we don't talk about nearly enough.
Exactly. And that's why I kind of feel like that Zeke pick was okay. When you have an offensive line that's built and ready to go, that a lot of teams don't have that, but hopefully we can get back to that situation.
That Packers line, like they were a fun crew to watch. Like they'd always do group interviews and whatnot. I think they were even in on like that singing Pitch Perfect all together. With Casey Matthews, with Clay Matthews.
That was really fun. Sitton, Lang. I think Corey Lindsley was a rookie when that came out, and then I think Bakhtiari was in there, and then Matthews. Obviously, they had to have Clay was
the base.
Yeah,
the hair.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else for players, G?
No, I mean that was the main one I wanted to go to, the underappreciated, unsung hero of the team. So
perfect. I know we talked a little bit about coaches before, but next we want to know who your favorite head coach in Packers history is.
Well, Vince Lombardi, obviously, but of coaches I've watched,
exactly,
Mike McCarthy, and I know Packers fans don't particularly like him because of the way things ended. But what sticks out to me is when I was in college, I interned for Packer Report with Bill Huber, and Bill Huber since moved on to Sports Illustrated. And I was just an intern. I was covering the draft for the first time. And it was the year that they picked HaHa Clinton Dix and Devontae Adams. And so that draft class for one is always pretty special to me, but I got to ask McCarthy a couple of questions. He gave me his typical evasive answers, but what I remember the most is the following year, I was at one of the games and I was standing in the tunnel after the game, and he just kind of looked at me and kind of like he recognized me, shook my hand, said, "Hey man, I hope things are going well for you." So just the thought that McCarthy cared enough to remember who I was and, wish me well. Maybe he didn't remember, and maybe that's what he was doing, but it certainly felt that way. That's the kind of person that he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he's a special human. And one of the biggest faults that he had as a coach was probably his best asset as a man. And that's, he's loyal to a fault. You watch like, some of the discussions of like defensive coordinators he kept too long with, like Dom Capers or something. It's because he was loyal to those guys. And that can be problematic in a business that is cutthroat win first. But as a person, I don't think there's any question that that's one of the best qualities you could possibly have as a human. And like I said, he was a special guy. I hate that he kind of makes me root for the Cowboys, but in a way he kind of does. I'm going to root for Coach Mike wherever he's at.
I know. Well, of course, I'm starting to learn more and more about him, especially him doing interviews this year and last year. And seems like a laid back guy, but he's actually kind of funny. I swear I didn't realize that when he was at the Packers, but every interview he has a joke. But what did you kind of get that vibe from him then?
Yeah. The Pittsburgh accent thing is always pretty funny too.
Yeah.
Like his, Green Bay kind of, I can't even do his voice justice, but there was one I remember somebody asked him, it was either his last year or his second to last year as the coach. Somebody asked him like the trade deadline that was coming up, what's that like? Cause Ted Thompson didn't make a lot of moves and those on that side of things. And they were like, hey, what's the trade deadline like around here? And Mike kind of said like, is it this week? I thought it was next week. And everybody looked around like, oh my God, these guys don't even know when the trade deadline is. And then he just kind of smiled and said, that's what it's like. We don't even really care basically when that is. So that was funny. He is a funny guy. The jokes obviously don't wear as well when you're not winning.
Yeah. Dallas is in the most recent years, probably like the last 10 years, has been pretty decent drafting. And when I was looking back at Mike McCarthy's draft history in Green Bay, I mean, that's pretty much how they built the team there, was through the draft. In 12 years as the head coach, he drafted 18 Pro Bowlers, which is pretty impressive. Multiple starters every year. Was he like one of the main guys in charge there? Do you think it was Mark Murphy, Ted Thompson, someone else that was kind of helping him out?
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit. Ted Thompson with John Schneider, Brian Gutekunst, Elliot Wolf, they had like an all-star crew in their front office that kind of went a couple different ways. And it was fun to kind of watch them put all that together and then watch those guys go out and do things on their own too. Obviously Schneider's had quite a bit of success in Seattle. John Dorsey built a good portion of that Kansas City team looks like a mini dynasty, or the Cleveland team that looks like it might be their biggest. You can make an argument right now that the two best teams in the AFC are Kansas City and Cleveland, and those both have John Dorsey's fingerprints all over them. And then obviously, Brian Gutekunst was Ted's protege. He was Ted's successor, and he's done really well here in Green Bay too, with the Smith brothers and Rashawn Gary, and Jair Alexander might be the best corner in football. That was his first pick, and the trade maneuvering to be able to get both Alexander and Darnell Savage the following year, both kind of staples of the Packers secondary. McCarthy did a really good job of coaching the team that was given to him. He always said he never really wanted his fingerprints in personnel. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe that's just because that's the way it is in Green Bay, but that's the way it was there. And like I said, he did a good job of coaching the team that he had for a while. It didn't end well. I'll be the first to admit that. It did not end well. I was at McCarthy's last game as the coach. They lost to the worst team in the NFL at home. Remember that pretty vividly. And it was ugly at the end, but that's just kind of the way things work.
Yep. Elliot Wolf was part of that Cleveland team too, wasn't he? Didn't he go over there?
Yeah, he was. And then after Dorsey got fired, he's actually now in New England. He's a consultant, or he doesn't have a big title right now.
Yeah. I was actually rooting for him because he came from that Ron Wolf tree, obviously. So.
Yep, Ron's kid.
Yeah.
Anything else for coaches, G?
No, I'm just curious, like, which coach did you not like the most? I mean, I know that you guys don't really have a lot of changeover.
Yeah. Oh no, there's an answer.
Okay.
It's Mike Sherman. In my lifetime, it went from Holmgren to Ray Rhodes, and Ray Rhodes was only there for a year. They fired him after that. And then they hired Mike Sherman. 4th and 26. I mentioned that earlier. Before it was 4th and 26, it was 4th and 1. And the Packers had the best running game in the NFL that year. And Mike Sherman punted, and he was just always spineless in moments like that. And I get it. If the strength of your team is your defense, then you're probably more likely to punt there. But this was drawn up perfectly. It was a bad Eagles run defense that was gassed against the best running game in football behind, we talked about underrated guard tandems, Mike Wall and Marco Rivera. They had Mike Flanagan, and then it was Chad Clifton and Mark Tauscher with the franchise's all-time leading rusher and Amon Green in the backfield. Hand it to him, gain 1 yard, you win. You're playing an NFC championship game against a Carolina team that you match up really well with and a chance to go to another Super Bowl. He punts. The rest is history. Mike Sherman, he kind of gave way to Brett Favre turning into a bit of a diva and gave him his own locker room and just all kinds of different stuff. Yeah, it was weird. And then Sherman, to add on to things, was Ron Wolf retires. They gave him the general manager gig that they wouldn't give Mike Holmgren a few years prior because Wolf wasn't ready to retire yet, which was fine. But, then you give it to Mike Sherman, and Sherman's like trading up in the 3rd round to draft a punter and just some moves that, like, he better thank God every day Twitter didn't exist when he was a coach and a general manager, because if you trade up in the 3rd round to draft a fucking punter, I mean, it's a position I think you should never spend a draft pick on.
Got it. All right, we're going to move on just a little bit. We want to know your favorite memory of all time being a Packers fan. I mean, you do got a Super Bowl in there that you probably remember pretty well.
Yeah, Super Bowl 45 is definitely it. I remember obviously 2 weeks prior they beat the Bears, and then that, your team was in the Super Bowl recently, so you kind of understand that. You got that 2-week gap between the championship game and the Super Bowl, and it's the longest 2 weeks of your life.
Exactly.
And just waiting, I was, like I said, I was 5 when I watched the Packers win the Super Bowl, so it was kind of like, oh, cool, they won, and then it's just, whatever. I'm 5 years old. I'm going to go play video games or whatever it was I was doing at that age. I was a freshman in college when they won the Super Bowl against Pittsburgh. And then they kind of had it, set up really well for them. I thought they matched up well with the Steelers. And then they have the big lead early, and then it kind of starts to fall apart a little bit. And then just kind of the range of emotions through that, but just kind of the sense of relief of like, finally, my team is the best one in the world. And there's nothing like, I remember after the game, somebody asked me, do you really think, cause they do this all the time, right? Like, oh, the best team doesn't always win. Like, okay, that's true. But like, they were like, do you think the Packers were the best team in football this year? And my response was, I don't fucking care. Like, because they're holding the trophy.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, I don't care if it was a fluke. I don't care if they were lucky. I don't care about it. I personally don't believe there's anything lucky about winning a Super Bowl. And I say that knowing the fact that the Giants in 2011 were like one of the worst teams to ever win a Super Bowl, but you can't win 4 straight playoff games and just be like, oh, that was lucky. And they're playing, it's not like you're playing some slapdick team, like, the Raiders or anything like that. You're playing 4 playoff teams, and the Giants did so, beating Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. And Tom Brady might be the greatest player to ever play football, and they beat him twice in the Super Bowl. Like, there's nothing lucky about that. So, Super Bowl 45 is definitely the answer on that. If you want me to give something that's not a championship, I was 10 yards away from the Des Bryant non-catch. And it happened right in front of me. So, being able to kind of see that happen in person, and then watch, Bryant kind of not agree with what happened and
go crazy on the
sidelines. I would like to point out there were 4 minutes left in that game when that play happened. So I don't know. I think it's sold as the game was won or lost on that play, when I think it's hard to say. Dallas definitely would have scored because he was down at the 1 and behind that line and DeMarco Murray and all that stuff. I felt bad because I do like Tony Romo. And I think Romo was like one of those, he gets a lot of blame for stuff. Like, there were years where the Cowboys went 8-8, and they were 8-8 because of him. Like, without him, they're 3-13 kind of thing. I watched him running around, he's playing with a bad back that day, figuring all that out. It was a tough, I mean, obviously I'm not too upset the Packers won, but being in the house for that game, which is kind of the iconic Packers home playoff game in the last decade, was pretty cool.
Yeah. And now I think everyone, I don't know if you agree with it, in today's football, it'd pretty much be a catch now.
Oh, it is. Yeah. They changed the rule because of that play. That was my thought at the time was like, that like commonsensically, that's a catch.
Yeah.
But the NFL rule book is going to tell us it's not. And now, yeah, it is. It absolutely. And it should have been called one. Well, it shouldn't have been called one, but it was one at the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Even though the catch rule still a little weird, that was like the weirdest year that they I don't know what the language exactly was, but it was really fucking with the referees.
I don't know. I'll never forget Des Bryant like coming out and saying, I took 3 steps. And I'm like, yeah, dude, but you were kind of like falling, and I don't know. It was weird and it's dumb. And
do you remember the Calvin Johnson one where he caught it and then set the ball down and then they still said it wasn't a catch? Yeah. One memory that I wanted to bring up, I'm sure you remember, it was again the 2010 NFC Championship versus the Bears. The BJ Raji pick 6. That's the one that I really remember him rumbling. He's actually moving pretty fast for a big guy. Rumbles into the end zone, does his little belly dance, but that you don't see that too often.
No, I remember like during that game. So if you guys don't remember that game, Green Bay was up 14-0, and Chicago had put in their 3rd string quarterback and eventually made it 14-7. So I'm just kind of sweating, hoping they make it out alive kind of thing. Raji gets the pick 6 and shakes his ass in the Soldier Field end zone and puts on the big Aaron Rodgers belt. I remember like at the time thinking, oh my God, we're going to the Super Bowl. But then like trying to put that thought out of my head as much as I could. Cause then I looked up at the clock and there's still like 11 minutes left or something like that when that happens. Yeah. Or maybe it was less than that, but it was crazy. It was just sheer elation at the time and thinking like, man, a defensive tackle with a pick 6. And like Raji had such a big personality and was such a likable dude, and ended up retiring early, basically to take care of his mother is what happened. And I think that, you haven't really heard from him a whole lot since then. He was one of those dudes that once he retired, he was kind of out of the spotlight, and that's been fun to kind of look back on his career and some of the stuff he did, but he was a lot of fun when he played.
Yeah. I think for me, for like one of the biggest Packers, well, I think I was a freshman in high school. It was that Brett Favre game against the Raiders the day after his dad died.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
What a performance, man.
That was the 2003 season. That was the year of 4th and 26.
Yeah.
And I thought they were the team of destiny because the week prior to 4th and 26, Al Harris says that we want the ball. We're going to score pick 6. And I mean, my dad and I, if you look at a picture of me and a picture of my dad, we're like the same person. And, just kind of at the time, it didn't make as much sense to me. But now you think back on that, like, dude, I wouldn't be able to function if my dad died. And this dude, a day later, it was just like, yeah, I'm gonna play football for a team that is in a playoff hunt and needs to win this game. Like, that's the other part that kind of Green Bay needed to win that night to have a chance to make the playoffs. You listen to the way that Favre kind of talks about that, and it's like his dad would have basically told him, get your ass out there and play. Like, that would have been the way that he would have viewed it. And yeah, that was just incredible. It was, if you don't believe in extra forces or God or, whatever, watching that game makes it tough to, I think, not believe in stuff like that.
Exactly. You see players, playing for coaches that, we've seen, who was it for the Colts that had cancer?
Chuck Pagano.
Yeah, Chuck Pagano. You see, just stuff like that where teams who should never win the game just come out and play lights out for them. But that was a Monday Night Football game versus the Raiders. Everyone saw it. It was prime time. He had 399 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, he was just in the zone.
Yeah. And how do you, football, this is why football to me is the number one sport, no matter what. And I love baseball and I like basketball and all, but football is number one because it really is just in its very nature an all for one for all kind of mentality. And I think games like that are a great example of how you can just everybody put their own stuff aside. Like, it be very easy for a player to say like, okay, man, whatever, like, cool, your dad died, but I'm not getting the ball enough, or we're not doing this enough. It's whatever. All the spotlight's on the quarterback and it shouldn't be, whatever. And that game is one way of, I remember, I think it was Donald Driver said he told the coaches or his other receivers that night, we're catching everything for Brett tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're catching everything for Brett tonight. And they did, because there were some plays where it's like Favre's just throwing the ball up into traffic and those guys came down with it. And, like I said, football by its very nature, I think is that way. And that's why it's the best game.
Yeah.
Well said, brother.
Yeah. Well, not every game, is winning the Super Bowl or Brett Favre showing up and playing lights out. Do
You
you
gonna make me
have,
go through my pain now?
yeah, do you have a worse memory being a Packers
Yeah.
fan?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's
Super
no
Bowl
question.
loss, playoff losses, players
Aaron
leaving.
Rodgers not showing up. I mean, what is it?
I don't care about that. I remember when they traded Brett Favre, and
Mhm.
like I said,
That
I've
was a
often
weird
said
one.
that this Rodgers thing can't hurt me because I thought Brett Favre was God, and they
Mhm.
traded him. So anything after that, that's nothing. It's a calling it a tie is a cop out, but I'm going to do it. The 2020, this last year, the NFC Championship game against the Bucks, I was there.
Oh,
And
didn't go for it.
being in the house to watch that.
Yeah.
But the Seattle game, from a pure game standpoint, in 2014, the onside kick, taking a knee after an interception, just everything that could have gone wrong did, and they should have won, and they didn't. And it's between those two. I think if I had to give it a slight edge, I'd say it's Tampa, just because I was there, and I was one of very few. It was a cool atmosphere. It was the home championship game, Rodgers versus Brady, all that stuff. And then you watch, 2 weeks later, like, here's the thing is, if Green Bay had won against Seattle 7 years ago, I don't think they would have beaten New England. And I'm one of the few Packers fans that I think will say that. Kansas City was playing 4 guards in the Super Bowl. Like, I think Green Bay wins that Super Bowl. And that one's tougher to swallow, because I think that, I feel really good about their chances of beating Kansas City. And then, is all this shit that's happening with Rodgers and the organization now, if they have an extra Lombardi in the pocket, like, I don't know. I tend to think it would, but who knows?
Yeah. The 2 games that I was thinking here were, of course, that NFC Championship versus the Seahawks. Was he a tight end, Bostic?
Yeah, and I've actually met Brandon, and he's really cool. So I don't give him a
Oh,
ton of shit for that. But
yeah, he's just put in a bad position. That onside kick, the pressure's got to be immense there.
Yeah, and if any of us are right there in that spot, we're doing the same thing, right? We're going for the ball, like, ball, catch it.
And the rules were a lot different than they are right now.
Yes,
that's when those guys were just literally gunning for you. They're all lined up on one side of the ball. You're not allowed to do that anymore. But Seattle ended up getting the ball back, and then Marshawn Lynch breaks off that 25-yard touchdown to win the game. And then, of course, you've mentioned it a couple times, 2004, the 4th and 26 game versus the Eagles in the playoffs.
Living with an Eagles fan made that a hell of a lot harder.
Yeah, I bet. Just against the Eagles, but McNabb to Freddie Mitchell for 27 yards on 4th and 26. Then the Eagles end up winning in overtime. Those ones, the ones that are really close, like I always say, blowouts happen from time to time, and you kind of give up on it by halftime or the third quarter. But those close ones, those overtimes, those onside kick games, those are the ones that really stick with you.
Yeah, strongly prefer, like, the 2019 championship game against the Niners, because, like, that game, it was 27-0 at halftime. Like, I knew it was over. It's like, okay, exactly. I don't even need to worry. Like, the second half is like, score a couple touchdowns to make me feel a little bit better. I really don't, but score a couple times, make it look a little better. But I prefer that far and away over the 2020 championship game. But yeah, the Eagles that was a tough one. I get over that a little bit more easily, I guess, just because, since my pops is an Eagles fan, I kind of have a soft spot for them.
Yeah.
I was in the house in Minnesota when they won the Super Bowl against New England. That was pretty cool. I spent a lot of time rooting for the Eagles, because in the mid 2000s, the Packers weren't very good. So, or they were, but they weren't as good as, like, the Eagles playing in the championship game, and then in the Super Bowl against New England the first time. And some of that stuff, just kind of putting all that together, the Eagles, if I don't believe in second favorite teams, but if I had a second favorite team, it would be the Eagles.
Yeah. Yep. One more memory I have to bring up. My quarterback just got hurt this year. We talked about Tony Romo playing injured. Was Aaron Rodgers getting hit by Anthony Barr. And, of course, versus a rival, he broke his collarbone and missed 9 weeks after. I think he tried to come back for one game in between. They lost that game, and he pretty much sat out the last 2 games because they didn't have a chance. But you guys had to struggle a little bit. Brett Hundley came in and tried his best. But do you remember that situation?
Yeah. I am a big believer that, football by its very nature is a violent game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Anthony Barr play was dirty.
Okay.
I know a lot of Packers fans
Yeah.
will say that. My counter argument to that is if it was our 52 against their number 7,
Mm-hmm.
then you wouldn't be saying that. But
Yep.
since and it sucks, like by very nature, right? Like I want to watch Aaron Rodgers against Dak Prescott when they play the
Mhm.
Cowboys, or, Trey Lance when they play the Niners, which they do this year, by the way. So that'll
Yep.
be fun. But football has injuries, and by its nature, the defensive players are trained hit the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when they're trained hit the quarterback and they have an opportunity to do that, then they do. And that's what they do. I think you're asking a player in that moment to think too logically of, I don't
Mhm.
need to hit him. Well, I always chuckle when they say unnecessary roughness is a penalty, because all of football is unnecessary roughness by its very nature. Getting a group of players together, and it's just football, man. Like it's by its very nature, like I said, it's violent. You hit people, and I don't think that play was dirty. It sucked that he got hurt on it. It sucked that, Brett Hundley wasn't ready for prime time, so to speak. There was some fun stuff that happened like in that time frame, which was kind of interesting. There was a game they lost against Pittsburgh on Sunday Night Football, which they should have gotten their ass kicked, but they ended up losing by a field goal at the buzzer, which was a bit of a gut punch. They won a couple ugly games against like Cleveland and then Chicago. They beat the Bears on the road. Brett Hundley played against their number 2 overall pick, and we still beat them. So I think that that was a lot of fun. But I enjoy football for what it is. It's a violent game. It's a hard game to play, and I'm a little, I guess, old school in nature when it comes to watching. I understand player safety, and I'm a proponent of that. I just also believe it's not possible to make this game safe by its very nature.
Well said.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
I don't think it was a dirty hit either. And I might just be taking a guess here, but it's probably because you've played before and you've been in that situation. And I think we probably all have right now. And you're exactly right. Just how defensive players get locked in and 1-2 steps away, man, there's no turning back. And nowadays seeing NFL players get better and better of, holding up and stuff is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it wasn't like the Joe Flacco Alonso hit. Like that was dirty. You know what I mean? Or like the any Burfitt hit.
Danny Trevathan versus Devontae Adams. There's a play like Adams is held up and then Trevathan just kind of launches in. Like that stuff you can control. But there's so many plays that end up like helmet to helmet, but you can tell like that's not their intention. It's just physics. Like you're asking, he's diving at the player, his head comes down when his body comes down, and like just, it sucks, but it's going to happen.
Yep.
Okay.
Ready to move on, G?
Yeah. So we want on to the future expectations. You guys just got done with the draft. The first round draft pick was another shocker. I thought maybe you guys are going to attack the receivers earlier. You guys ended up with a pretty solid one with Amari Rodgers, but the first draft pick was Eric Stokes, I believe, correct?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one was a need because Josh Jackson isn't living up to his expectations. So how did you feel when you guys drafted Stokes? Was it sort of the same feeling when you guys drafted Love or what?
Oh, no. When I drafted Jordan, I didn't do it. When they drafted Jordan Love, all I felt was straight shock. I didn't know, like, I couldn't believe that they actually did. I know they had talked about it, but it was just like, really? I just couldn't believe it. And it didn't help. I didn't care that they drafted a quarterback. I don't care about the quarterback's feelings. I think that Aaron Rodgers should understand he's in the situation he's in the same exact way that Jordan Love would be in this situation, kind of thing. But it was stunning because there were 4 years left on Aaron's contract and just all the financial implications that came with it. And obviously that's kind of playing out now. When they drafted Stokes, it's funny to me to watch the shift in the paradigm, because it was after the NFC Championship game, it was like, okay, fix the corner spot opposite of Jair Alexander. Like the offense was the best offense in football. You could fix that corner spot. And then like the week before the draft, we started talking again about how they hadn't drafted a receiver in the first round. And there were some smoke screens about, and I do know they really liked Rashad Bateman. I do know that if he was at 29, they may have picked him. We'll never know because he got picked by the Ravens, but they may have gone there. But when they after Bateman was gone, it's not like there was a receiver that you can just say, oh yeah, pick him. The Packers typically don't draft short guys, especially early. Now I say that they drafted a 5'8" receiver in the third round, but no, I wasn't surprised. And I think that, if Stokes is good by the middle of the year and playing and contributing, everyone would be like, oh, okay. Like that's why they picked that guy. Like, I don't know. I feel like it should have been that way at the time, because if you watch the NFC Championship game, Kevin King didn't play well. And Kevin King really hasn't played well since being in Green Bay. You mentioned Jackson. That's somebody who hasn't played well at all since being in Green Bay. They need that guy opposite of Alexander. They're kind of searching now for, we were talking earlier, and it's kind of funny how this comes full circle, but we were talking earlier about how Matthews didn't have a running mate as a pass rusher. Well, Alexander hasn't had a running mate at the cornerback spot. So they're kind of trying to find that. And Stokes is very intriguing. A lot of raw talent.
Did you have an alternative pick you wanted there, or was Stokes a guy that you're comfortable with? I
was comfortable. Yeah, I was comfortable when they took him. At the time I was looking at some offensive tackles. Tevin Jenkins was one. I really liked him out of Oklahoma State. Yeah. The Packers could have used some depth on the offensive line, but overall, like I said, I kind of sit back and watch the entire thing play out and then think like, okay, their plan was this, their plan was that. The Packers' plan this year was to add physicality and pieces kind of around the edges. They think they have a championship core, and I agree with them if Aaron Rodgers comes back. But they think they have a championship core, and I agree with them. So what did they add? They added a starter at cornerback, they hope. They added a starter at center with Josh Myers, they hope. And then that gadget, player that kind of like what Deebo Samuel is in San Francisco. They're not the same player, but that's what they envision kind of for Amari Rodgers. And then kind of working around that way. And they kept, the other thing is like, everybody says the Packers don't ever go all in. Their salary cap situation is a tire fire going into the future years. And they did that so they could keep Preston Smith, Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark. So I kind of disagree with that notion.
Yeah. You guys drafted a late rounder too. I think it was your guys' last pick, Kellen Hill.
Oh yeah, Kylan Hill.
Really big fan of him, and he was a really good, strong character guy. And I remember when you guys lost Jamal Williams and you guys drafted Kalen Hill, I was like, oh well, that's just the replacement right there. And plus, you got old Thunder Thighs over there.
Yeah. We had a show we had a weekly show with Jamal Williams that came on this year, and got to know him and his family pretty well. That was cool. That was a tough one to swallow. Once they re-signed Aaron Jones, you kind of knew what the deal was for Jamal. But, I wish him well in Detroit. I told him when he left that, I hope you run for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Packers, but you guys lose. That's just kind of how that's going to be. But I root for him in 15 out of 17 games, if that's the way it's got to be. But yeah, Kylan Hill, I think LaFleur's talked about wanting 3 legitimate guys that can carry the ball. And getting that group, ready to do that. And they have Aaron Jones and they have AJ Dillon. Now it's can Hill be that third guy? I think he's the leader in the clubhouse.
I think he can, because he was a bell cow over there at Mississippi State, I think it was Costello who couldn't really, he was average, and then they leaned a lot on that running game. So,
and then they brought in Mike Leach, who doesn't even pretend to throw the ball.
Exactly. So, I think Kellen Hill can do that. Duran, anything else about the draft class?
No, nothing about draft.
So when it comes to, I know you guys' cap situation, you said is in a quote tire fire. Jair Alexander. Yeah. So what's the next move with him? Are you guys going to pick up his 5th year, or are you guys going to extend him? What's going on?
They already did. Yeah. They picked up his option shortly after the draft, right before the deadline, so to speak. They'll extend him. I think that if there's something about the Packers that you can always tell is when they have it. The question I always ask, when's the last time Green Bay had a great player that you knew was great? So like Casey Hayward doesn't count, because Casey Hayward, we weren't sure if he was a great player at a premium position. When's the last time a player like that's been in Green Bay and left after or before getting a second contract? Devontae Adams was one, and before that it was Jordy, and before Jordy it was Cobb and Brian Balaga, and they signed their own guys. Yeah. And I know that they did all this stuff to push money into the future and, kind of put guys on the credit card, so to speak. But if you look at, Alexander and Adams, those are the 2 guys coming up that are going to be due for some big money extensions. Adams, I'm not 100% confident just because it would be a third contract instead of a second one. But Alexander, I would be stunned if he's not a Packer for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, both of those guys could be the number one paid player at their position too.
Oh yeah, and they're both great. Alexander he's the best corner I've seen in Green Bay since Tramon Williams in his prime. And he's better than that. Alexander is legitimately a lockdown number one corner. They throw the ball to the other side of the field because he's not worth challenging, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My question, I do have one about Aaron Rodgers. Just what's the ideal outcome here? I mean, of course, extension, maybe keeping him there. If you don't think that's possible, maybe trading him, getting some value. Is there something else? What are you thinking there?
Well, ideal is that this never happened, but since it has, I think an extension is what's going to happen. You don't say as many things publicly as Mark Murphy said in his column for Packers.com yesterday, 2021 and beyond. We're committed to him for 2021 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Rodgers wants is, what does beyond mean? Does that mean, you want to play with me year to year? Because I think this part of the reason he's doing the things that he's doing is because he doesn't want to be a lame duck quarterback. He doesn't want to go into every year thinking, is this it? Is this my last year in Green Bay? He wants some longer term security, which I understand that. Not necessarily the business that we work in, but I can understand wanting that. And he's one of the players that has the power to be able to do that. I do not agree with the notion of call his bluff, let him sit, make him retire if he really wants to prove his point. I think, you guys know, I'm sure you've made a couple jokes on your own about the Detroit Lions, and Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson would rather retire than play for those guys. Do you really want that to be a joke about the Green Bay Packers, that you forced maybe the most talented player in the history of the position to retire if he's really not going to show up? And I don't think that's the case. I think that they're going to get a deal done, something that makes sense for, everybody involved. The Packers will have to give some concessions. Maybe that means Jordan Love never is the starter in Green Bay, and the Packers just have to be like, okay, we eat it, we move on. We didn't think Aaron could be an MVP caliber player anymore. Clearly he can't. So we're going to stick with him. I think that if that can't happen, then trading him is something you have to do. And I think that Denver is the popular name, and I think it's the name that makes the most sense. They can give guys like, for example, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, on the offensive side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball, Bradley Chubb, Patrick Surtain. There's a safety named Simmons, whose first name escapes me, that comes to mind. And they didn't give up a bunch of their draft capital to go get a quarterback. So they still have all those. They still have all their picks. That's the one that makes the most sense. Ultimately, though, Aaron Rodgers is one of the smartest people I've ever seen. And I think he has to know that his best chance to win a Super Bowl and cement his legacy, which he states he cares about, is to play in Green Bay. Yeah. And, I think that a lot of people are like, the fantasy football analysts we were talking about earlier is like, they'll have Jeudy and Sutton and Fant and Albert O and these running backs and all that stuff if they get Aaron Rodgers. Like, well, they're going to give up some of those guys to get Aaron Rodgers too.
Yeah.
And their offensive line, their tackle situation, Juwan James is one of their starters. He blew his Achilles. He's not on the team. They are not in a good situation up front right now. So ultimately, my guess is training camp starts at the end of July. I think sometime after the 4th of July, you'll hear something along the lines of, Aaron's coming back and he's on an extension, and they'll do some. I made the joke earlier today that my bold prediction is the Lil Wayne song. The first line that is once a Packer, always a Packer. I'm green and yellow. That the Packers will show something with him on their social media page with that line in the background.
There you go.
That's pretty cool, man.
Free advice to the Packers social media team. If you guys need my help.
Yep. Gee, I got one more question. You got anything
Have at
else?
It, man.
You got it. Gutekunst and Mark Murphy, I think, taking a lot of heat right now. Is there anything that you could kind of say positive about them, whether it be drafting, hiring the staff, giving players their second contracts and keeping them in-house?
Yeah, the only thing that the Gutekunst and company haven't done well since being in Green Bay is communicate with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
I agree. The whole idea of, you didn't tell him you're drafting a quarterback. Now, me personally, do I think that would have mattered or changed anything? No, I think he just would have been pissed off 30 seconds earlier. But that's the only thing. I mean, you look at I mentioned Jair Alexander. Before he drafted Jair Alexander, he trades out of that pick and then moves back up, but gets another first-round pick that turned into Darnell Savage. Rashawn Gary is a breakout candidate this year as a pass rusher. AJ Dillon, you guys have mentioned as somebody there that could be a key contributor. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was a 5th-round pick, and he led the league in yards per catch last season. That's not nothing as a 5th-round pick. He signs Darius Smith, Preston Smith, Billy Turner, and Adrian Amos in one offseason. All of those guys are still on the team, and they were all really good free agent signings. Again, not nothing. And I just think that they represent the organization relatively well. Now, obviously, some of the dirty laundry stuff that's coming out now, most of the time the fans are going to side with the player, and fans of the outside team are going to side with the player. I think it's become a very popular thing to make Aaron Rodgers a martyr and say the Packers have basically thrown around the 3 of us to play around him. And I don't agree. We've talked about they've had the best offensive line in football. They had it last year, and they've had that a couple different times when he's been in Green Bay. Their tight end led the league in touchdowns last year. Devontae Adams might be the best receiver in the NFL. Aaron Jones is really good. And then you talk about, I always say this, because everybody throws up those graphics that say they've never drafted a receiver in the first round, which my response is, who gives a shit? But the second response I have to that, the Packers have not lost a playoff game with Aaron Rodgers because they didn't have enough offensive firepower. It's because their defense sucked. Now, you can criticize them for not building up their defense well enough. I'll listen to that. But I don't think that they've ever had not enough guys on offense to win a game in the playoffs, and they've lost because of that. Most of the time it's been the 2019 NFC Championship game, I think, is a really good example of that. They didn't lose because they didn't have enough dudes on offense. They lost because Raheem Mostert is still running. So I am maybe not full throated, but full support for, or as close to that as I can be, for Brian Gutekunst. Mark Murphy is a little annoying because he talks a little too much for somebody who's not an owner. He kind of gets to thinking he's Jerry Jones sometimes, but you're not, so shut up. But overall, I mean, they hired Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur's 26-6 in his first 2 seasons. That's not nothing. So the Packers are one of the best organizations in football. I think this situation has allowed people to get their jokes off and say different things about how they've only won 1 Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. But my question is, in the last 30 years, guys, how many well, that's not a great example. Aaron Rodgers has been the starter for 16 years. How many championships have the 49ers won? And I'm not doing this to rub salt in the wound. I'm proving a point.
Yeah, they
haven't won any. And the Cowboys haven't either. I mean, the Cowboys and the 49ers are 2 of the most storied franchises in the entire sport. Not a single championship. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the jokes about how the Cowboys haven't won a playoff game since 1995 or been to an NFC championship since 1995. It's a really long time. It's hard to win in the NFL. And I think what Tom Brady has done is skewed what is normal.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%.
Well, that's it for me, G.
That's it for me as well. Jacob, thanks again for coming on, man. We appreciate you so much. If you want to go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you, shout out any type of work you're working on, have at it.
Yeah, Game On Wisconsin at Game On WI on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search us Game On Wisconsin. We pop right up. The GW on my hat right here is the logo that you'll see. Check us out. If you're a Packers fan, we've got a lot of good stuff in the works, including maybe a little party or something like that for this upcoming season. Now that we're out of our, hopefully, knock on wood, out of our COVID restrictions, we can kind of play around a little bit. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, that's really where you can find just about everything. So thanks, guys, for having me on.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it so much. You can find us on YouTube as well at Why We're Fans. Follow us on Twitter at Why We're Fans Pod. It was great, having you, especially after this whole Aaron Rodgers drama. We wanted to get a Packers fan on, and honestly, you fit the bill, shouted you out, and man, thanks, man. Thanks for sharing your story with us. We really, really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me, and I'll make sure that we share this around so people can find you as well. I like what you guys are doing, finding the different backgrounds of, every fan base.
Yep. Everyone's different, but thanks for joining us. Good luck this year, and we'll catch up with you.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good one.
Later.